Hello, my name is Tylluan. I'm a solitary pagan witch, I'm an author and the founder of the Wolf and Howl Press. This evening's little chat is about Samhain, Halloween. I did a talk on this recently, I know, and now this is just a few more little thoughts on celebrating. One of the things I find a little bit disheartening that nowadays, it's good that people do celebrate more because it is an important festival and it wasn't much celebrated when I was young. But I think the problem now is that we're going a bit the other way and we're confusing celebrating it with trick-or-treating. And as witches, pagans, what have you, there is a religious, if you like, a spiritual element to this festival that is in danger of getting carried away with all the plastic skulls and vampire costumes and pumpkins. So what I wanted to talk about today, only briefly, is just what I feel is the real importance of the festival. First of all, in the UK anyway, it is the start of winter. Now, a lot of people will tell you, no. Winter starts on the winter solstice. Well, if the winter solstice is midwinter's day, it can't also be the first day of winter. And it doesn't behave like the first day of winter. Once we reach this festival now, Samhain, Halloween, we are talking about the end of the harvests. The harvests are what mark the autumnal or fall festivals. And in autumn we have this lovely series of harvest festivals because there is no single harvest, you see. Different things are harvested at different times. Grains such as wheat will be harvested at a certain point of the summer, the late summer, early autumn. Other things such as berries are they're harvested a little later on. Nuts might be a little later still. So we don't have a single harvest, we have a series of them. And once we reach this period, a lot of nature's bounty, if you like, is gone. We're not going to pick blackberries now. We're not going to gather hazelnuts or cobnuts. We're not going to go getting much by way of mushrooms. Some areas might still have it, and you have to be guided by what's in your area. But for me, where I live on the side of this Welsh mountain, no, we're not. This is it. It's going to rain pretty heavily now for weeks, months. It's going to get colder. We're going to get snow. Nearly every year here I get snowed in. These are all things that I know and I expect and I look forward to. And so this is something we have to think of. Why do we celebrate it? We celebrate it because we are coming to the end of the bounteous part of the year. And hopefully by now we will have made our jam, gathered our produce, done what have you. In fact, the Anglo-Saxons made a reference, they used to call November the blood month, the month of killing the animals you'd reared, things like pigs, simply because until the agricultural revolution of the 18th century, people didn't understand how to feed and keep most of their animals through the winter. So the idea that you sacrificed them, you killed them, you preserved them, you smoked, you salted the flesh, that was what you had to do. And in bad years, or particularly long winters, people would literally starve. So that's one aspect of it. Another one is that we're always told at this time of year, this festival, we honour the ancestors. Now this is a more tricky one. How do we do it? There are some of my ancestors I personally would not want to honour with anything other than a cricket bat. Some of them were really horrible. But what we are really honouring in our ancestors is not the people we may have known or people we may have heard about. We are honouring those huge numbers of ancestors, untold, that are in the shadows. We don't know them. We don't know anything about them. What we do know, though, is that they survived. They survived terrible, terrible harvests. They survived great disasters. They survived ice ages. And if you doubt me on this, you sit down with a a pad of paper and a pen, and you work out, you allow 30 years per generation, which is generous, and you start off with yourself, one person, 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, and on you go, doubling as you go. And by the time you get back to something like 1066, which for us in the UK is a very significant date, the Norman Conquest, the Battle of Hastings, by the time you get that back to that period, you have more ancestors than there were alive in the British Isles at that time. And if you think that applies to everybody, then what it tells us is that we are all related to each other. So when we are celebrating and honouring the ancestors, we are honouring how they survived. We are honouring them in their determination, if you like, to bring up the next generation. Some of them were good parents, some of them were great parents, some of them, I have no doubt, were absolutely dreadful. But what we are honouring is the fact we are here today. And this is very important. You know, there's this wonderful festival in ancient Egypt called the Festival of the Netrayet. And it actually took place at around the very last few days of October, around what we call Halloween, Samhain. And this Netrayet festival involved bringing out the mummies and taking them on barges down the Nile to the temple and honouring them that way. And whereas when I was young, we used swedes and turnips as lanterns, and nowadays they use pumpkins, which are much easier to carve, the Egyptians used onions. And it sounds wonderful, but they made these strings of onions to hang around the necks of the mummies. Rather like the strings of onions that we get over here, where the onion sellers from Brittany used to come over on their bicycles when I was a girl. And being Welsh, we used to call them the Shunny Onion Man. Not properly, it isn't Welsh. It's just this sort of Wenglish that we use, Shunny Onion. So why did we do it? Because why did they do it, the Egyptians? Because onions grow with their roots in the ground and sort of partly in the ground, and then the rest comes up above. And like the dead, you see, like the turnips, like the Swedes, they are almost root crops. And they were bringing things out of the ground and reanimating them. And that's what we do. When we carve a Swede or something like that, we are bringing something out of the ground in the same way as the dead are mostly in the ground, and we are carving a face, and then we put light in it and we reanimate it. And just as we do that, we are in fact lighting up the ancestors, lighting up their memory, reanimating, if you like, bringing back the memories of those who have gone before, whether or not we remember them. The same symbolism doesn't quite apply to the pumpkin, but nevertheless, I mean, they are much easier to carve and they do make great faces. But again, don't get carried away with the idea that you have to make a pumpkin sculpture. You don't. And it's about learning to see what there really is. And this, I feel, is terribly important. It's learning to understand. So I hope I've shed a little light on what honouring the ancestors really is. We are thinking of them. We are remembering them. We are thinking, gosh, you know, we've come to these terribly cold nights, and it is cold now. Round about this time in the UK, we change the hour back. And then we get very dark evenings, long dark nights. And so long dark nights, we start to think of other worlds. We hear the wind, and it takes on a different character at this time of year. So that's what we're doing. You can leave offerings for them. I mean, if you leave offerings outside, the birds will probably take them, but that's good too. Birds were often associated with human souls. So it's not a bad thing. I would certainly recommend trying in some way, even if it's only lighting a candle and saying, ancestors, I honour you. And do that. Try it, you know. And thank you very much for listening. I will be back in a minute with another one, because we're coming to the end of the month, and I'd like to deal a little bit more with this time of year and its festival. Goodbye.